What if everything you've been told about heartbreak, silence, and walking away is only half the truth? What if no contact is just the beginning and not the powerful endgame so many believe it to be? Think about it. They leave. You're hurt. And what's the advice you see plastered everywhere? Go silent, vanish, let them miss you. But here's the real question: what if they don't? What if your silence becomes their peace? What if your absence is the freedom they always wanted, not the regret you hoped they'd feel? That's where most men fail, not because they're weak, but because they rely on silence to do the heavy lifting while they remain stuck, replaying memories, checking socials, counting days like prisoners waiting for a miracle. Let's break that illusion. In Stoic relationships, power doesn't come from what you withhold. It comes from what you become, from the transformation that happens in the void, not the void itself. You see, most people approach no contact with the wrong energy. They do it hoping to get noticed, hoping to be missed. But in doing so, they betray the very thing they're trying to master, themselves. Stoicism isn't about passive waiting. It's about active becoming. It's not about making someone regret leaving you. It's about rising so far beyond their expectations that your absence becomes undeniable, not because it's loud, but because it's powerful. Because you didn't disappear, you evolved. If you've ever thought, "I'll show them by staying silent," then this message is for you. Because silence without transformation is just hiding, and hiding doesn't shake. They're reality. It only delays your healing. This isn't about games. This is about growth. Deep, personal, unshakable growth. So if you're tired of feeling stuck, if you're done with waiting for someone to look back, if you're ready to stop surviving and start transcending, keep watching. The next steps will not only change how they see you, they'll change how you see yourself. And once that shift happens, you'll realize this was never about them. It was about becoming the version of you that you were always meant to meet. And here's the twist. When you stop needing them to feel it, they'll feel it more than ever. Stick with me to the very end, because what comes next isn't just theory. It's the Stoic path, sharpened with real-world edge. This is Stoic Relationships brought to life, the truth no one tells you, the power you didn't know you had, and the transformation they'll never see coming. 1. The transformation mindset. Evolve beyond recognition. When someone leaves you, when they walk away without looking back, without closure, without explanation, your instinct might be to try to prove something to them, to show them they made a mistake. You might imagine them scrolling through your old photos, checking your stories, wondering what you're doing and who you're doing it with. But here's the cold truth. They're not. Not yet. Because in their mind, you haven't changed. You're still who they left, still grieving, still checking your phone, still trapped in the very version of you they decided they could live without. That's the harsh but necessary perspective that most people avoid. And it's where the path of Stoicism begins, not in denial of pain, but in using pain as a catalyst for transformation. In the philosophy of Stoic relationships, emotions are not suppressed. They are disciplined, redirected, and forged into strength. And that is what must happen now. Because the only thing more powerful than silence is evolution. You must become unrecognizable, not to seek revenge, not to trigger regret, but because growth is no longer an option. It is a necessity. So ask yourself, what does the best version of you look like? Is he stronger, more focused? Does he walk into a room and command respect without a word? Does he wake up early with a mission in mind? Does he allow his past to define his present? Or does he use it as fuel to rise into a future that was never possible while he stayed the same? Think about it. Why did they leave? Not always because of something you did, but because they believed they could do better. That might sting, it might feel unfair, but in that brutal honesty lies the key to your power. Because the moment you accept that, you stop chasing the ghost of who you were and start building the reality of who you can become. Most men crumble here. They beg, they plead, they promise to change for her. But that isn't change. That's desperation. That's still orbiting around someone else's validation. That's still being defined by someone else's decision. And if she was the sun you orbited, she will never see you as the fire you truly are. So stop hoping she sees your worth. Start acting like you've finally seen it for yourself. That is the transformation mindset. That is stoicism in motion, not in silence, but in self-mastery. You don't text her. You don't watch her stories. Not because you're playing a game, but because you're too busy upgrading everything. Your body, your income, your environment, your boundaries, your standards, your vision. You stop asking what she's doing and start asking what's the next version of you she'll never get access to. This isn't about improving to win her back. This is about improving so much that if she ever returns, she no longer fits in your world. Because here's what happens when you level up authentically. She sees it. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but when you show up with a sharpened edge, with presence, with peace, with confidence that isn't loud but unwavering, she will feel it. When others start noticing you, when new people are drawn to your energy, when you're no longer available for the past she abandoned, it hits her, not because you wanted her to regret it, but because your growth left her behind. And that's the kind of realization that cuts deeper than any message or silence. But again, let's be clear, you don't do this for her. That's where most men go wrong. They focus on external transformation while still hoping for internal validation. They become fit, successful, social, but inside they're still checking. Their phones, still waiting for a sign, still needing her approval. That's not power, that's costume. True transformation is internal first. It's when you look in the mirror and see a man who's no longer performing. A man who doesn't flinch when memories hit. A man who's found purpose beyond pain. That's the man who commands not attention, but respect. That's the man who doesn't need to speak loudly because his energy is undeniable. And when you become him, not for her, not for anyone, but for yourself, your world changes. Not because the past gets rewritten, but because it no longer defines you. So now, the question becomes, are you willing to let go of who you were in order to become who you were meant to be? Are you willing to stop waiting, stop wondering, and start building? Because the moment you choose that path, you've already won. Even if she never sees it, even if she never comes back, because she was never the destination, she was just the detour that revealed the weakness you needed to conquer. The truth is, most men never evolve because they stay emotionally attached to the idea of who they used to be with her. They hold on to memories like lifelines. But growth requires letting go, not just of her, but of the version of you that settled, compromised, clung, and lost himself in the process. The man who survives heartbreak is not the one who waits for time to heal. It's the one who decides that this pain will be the reason he never settles again, that this version of loss will be the spark that ignites the greatest version of himself. And so you move. You train harder, you earn more, you speak less, you cut distractions, you become the kind of man who sets his own standard. And when she sees that, when others see that, when you feel that, it no longer matters who left, because you've risen beyond needing their return. That's the Stoic path. That's Stoic relationships in their truest form. Not emotional games, but emotional sovereignty. Not fake indifference, but genuine detachment rooted in purpose. When you evolve beyond recognition, you don't just change how they see you, you change how you see yourself. And once that happens, no one can take that away. 2. The void principle. Make silence work for you. Silence is not the absence of sound, it's the presence of power. But most people completely misunderstand what no contact is supposed to be. They treat it like a trick, a countdown, a test of patience meant to trigger curiosity or manipulate emotions. They think, if I just don't text her, if I disappear, she'll realize what she lost. But here's a question that most never dare to ask themselves. What if she doesn't? What if she enjoys the silence? What if your absence becomes her comfort zone instead of a void? That's when silence becomes weakness. Not because it failed, but because you never made her feel it. Because you vanished, but you didn't evolve. Because she still feels your emotional presence, even when you're physically gone. You watch her stories, you check her last scene, you think of her constantly, and on a subconscious level, she knows. That's why she doesn't chase. That's why she doesn't crack. Because deep down, she feels you haven't really left. She still feels like she owns a part of you, and as long as she feels that way, she has no reason to miss you, regret you, or reevaluate you. You've got to understand this. Attention doesn't require contact. Energy doesn't need words. She can feel when you're still emotionally tethered, when you're still hoping, waiting, clinging to the fantasy of her return. The void principle isn't just about creating absence. It's about becoming invisible in her emotional world while becoming invincible in your own. It's about removing yourself so completely, so intentionally, that she begins to feel the weight of your disappearance. Not because you ghosted, but because your presence can no longer be found in her reality. She doesn't just notice you're gone, she feels it. She starts asking questions. Why hasn't he reached out? Is he over me? Did he find someone else? Was I wrong about him? These questions don't arise from silence, they arise from contrast. She doesn't regret leaving because she hears nothing from you. She regrets leaving when what she used to feel from you disappears completely and is replaced with an unsettling void, a vacuum of energy where she once felt control. That's when her confidence cracks. Because now, instead of comfort, she's met with confusion. Instead of reassurance, she's haunted by uncertainty. Most men fail here because they can't resist the urge to reach out. They confuse distance with detachment. But Stoicism teaches us that detachment isn't about pretending not to care. It's about no longer needing to react. When you stop reacting, you start reclaiming your power. Every message you don't send is a declaration of independence. Every moment you resist checking her page is a moment you claim back your time, your energy, your identity. When you fully embrace the void, you begin to understand its psychological impact. Human beings don't fear emptiness, they fear the unknown. And when she doesn't know what you're doing, who you're with, what you're thinking, it begins to gnaw at her. She's no longer sure of her grip on your emotions. And for someone who once held your attention without effort, that loss of certainty is devastating. This is the shift. This is where no contact becomes transformation and where stoic relationships begin to separate boys from men. Because now, she's not just alone. She's without your validation, without your gaze, without the comfort of knowing that you're still in orbit. But make no mistake, none of this works unless you've truly removed yourself. If you're still watching her from the shadows, you're not in control. If you're still reacting emotionally when you hear her name or see her face, she still owns real estate in your mind. And as long as that's true, you haven't created a void, you've just created space. Space that she knows she can still fill if she wants to. The true void is built through silence that is not passive, but powerful. It's built through discipline, through the decision to cut off not just contact, but connection, to sever not just the line of communication, but the psychological thread that ties you to her approval. That's what makes her feel it. That's what makes her question her decision. That's what makes her feel like she lost something, not because you withdrew, but because she realizes she no longer has access to a man who once gave her everything. Think about that. The man who once would have dropped anything to reply. In seconds, who once chased every breadcrumb of hope is now unreachable. Not because he hates her, not because he's bitter, but because he simply no longer exists in her frame of reference. He's moved, he's leveled up, he's immersed in purpose. That is the void, not emptiness, not avoidance, but elevation. A man who fills his silence with strength becomes impossible to ignore, not because he posts thirst traps, not because he flaunts rebound relationships, but because he disappears in the only way that truly matters, by becoming a better version of himself. You see, silence alone is fragile. It breaks the moment you act out of emotion. But when silence is built on discipline, when it's backed by self-respect, it becomes a fortress. She can knock on the door all she wants, but you're not home. You're building something. You're sculpting a man from the ashes of heartbreak. And every day you stay in that void, not just physically but mentally, you make it harder for her to reach you. And if she does, if one day the silence becomes too loud for her to ignore and she reaches out with a casual, "Hey," don't rush, don't collapse, don't mistake curiosity for commitment. Respond, maybe, but do it from your throne. Cold, calm, collected, because this is no longer about getting her back. This is about staying aligned with the man you've become. And if you fold, if you go back to needing her response, her attention, her affection, you undo everything the void gave you. So let her sit with it. Let her feel the difference between the man she left and the man she can no longer access. That is where real regret is born. Not in being ignored, but in being outgrown. You don't have to be cruel. You don't have to be fake. Just be focused. The most stoic move isn't pretending you don't care. It's showing through your actions that you've detached so deeply. Her presence or absence no longer shifts your emotional center. That is magnetic. That is haunting. That is stoicism applied to real life, to relationships, to your own evolution. And when she finally sees that she no longer has emotional leverage, when she realizes she can no longer shake you, that's when she feels it. Not the silence, the void. So if you're watching this and you've committed to leveling up in silence, not to manipulate, but to master yourself, I want you to do something right now to lock in that mindset. Like this video, drop a comment that says, Number 1, if this principle resonates with you, and don't forget to subscribe. This channel isn't about getting them back. It's about rising so high they can't reach you anymore. And if that's your path, you're exactly where you belong. 3. Emotional detachment. Indifference is magnetic. She expected you to care. She expected you to spiral. She expected late-night texts, emotional pleas, desperate attempts to prove your worth or resurrect what was lost. That's the pattern she's familiar with because most men she's dealt with collapse under emotional pressure. They chase, they argue, they beg, and in doing so, they confirm exactly what she wants to believe, that she still holds power, that she's still the center of your emotional gravity. But what happens when you break that pattern? What happens when you don't react? Not because you're numb, but because you're composed. That's when the rules change. That's when stoic relationships shift the game completely. Indifference is not pretending. It's not posting happy pictures while dying inside. It's not fake smiles or forced conversations. It's an internal state. A place of calm, a fortress of detachment where nothing she does can disturb your peace. True emotional detachment is magnetic because it's rare, and anything rare is automatically valuable. In a world full of emotional volatility, a man who remains unshaken becomes impossible to forget. Why? Because women are not used to being met with true emotional distance, especially from men they once believed they could control. That distance is not just physical, it's energetic. She can feel it. She senses it in your tone, in your stillness, in the absence of curiosity. She wonders, why isn't he chasing? Did he ever care? Has he already moved on? And those questions don't comfort her, they haunt her. But again, this isn't about haunting her. It's about healing yourself. Emotional detachment is not about being cold. It's about being complete. It means no longer needing validation, not just from her, but from anyone. It means you no longer look outside of yourself for peace. You don't need to prove your worth because you've already accepted it as truth. This is where most men fail. They think detachment means avoidance, so they bottle up their emotions, pretend they don't care, and call it stoicism. But that's not stoicism, that's denial. Real stoicism invites you to acknowledge pain without submitting to it, to feel loss without letting it consume your identity. It means knowing that love, heartbreak, attention, all of it is external, and anything external can come and go without disrupting your internal state. That is power, that is indifference, not apathy but sovereignty, the ability to experience emotion without being ruled by it. And that's what makes it magnetic. When she sees that her absence doesn't rattle you, that her silence doesn't spark anxiety, she starts to see you differently, not as the man she left, but as the man who cannot be moved by anything she does. And this realization shakes her, because emotional detachment breaks the illusion of control. She no longer knows how to reach you. Her old tricks, delayed replies, jealousy games, breadcrumb messages fall flat. They don't trigger a reaction, they don't get a rise out of you, and for someone used to holding emotional leverage, this creates an internal crisis. But again, your focus is not her crisis, it's your clarity. And clarity only comes when you step outside the chaos, when you stop letting your mind run loops of what if? Why did she? What if she's with someone else? Those thoughts are poison. They keep you enslaved to a version of reality where your peace depends on her choices. But in the world of Stoic relationships, your peace is earned, not given. You earn it by choosing not to suffer. You earn it by choosing to release the need for closure. You earn it by realizing that if someone can walk away from you, their role in your life is already complete. Maybe she was there to teach you a lesson. Maybe she revealed the parts of yourself that needed work. But once the lesson is done, your attachment becomes your limitation. Detachment is freedom. It is not the absence of feeling, but the ability to choose which feelings deserve your energy. You are not a slave to longing. You are not a prisoner to old memories. You are a man with direction, a man with purpose. And when your purpose is strong enough, no woman can shake you from it. That's when you become truly attractive. Not because you're trying to be, but because you've detached from the need to be seen, and paradoxically, that's what makes you unforgettable. She remembers the man who once needed her, but now he's gone, replaced by someone who no longer needs anyone. And that shift, when real, is irreversible. But again, don't fake this. Don't try to appear detached. Don't post cryptic quotes or disappear for 3 days, hoping she notices. That's not detachment. That's manipulation, and it backfires every time. Real detachment doesn't need to be seen. It's not a show, it's a decision, a lifestyle. You wake up and choose not to check her page. You feel the urge to text, and instead, you go train. You have a memory, and instead of indulging it, you breathe through it and let it pass like a cloud. That's how detachment is built, brick by brick, choice by choice. And the more you choose yourself over the ghost of what you had, the more solid you become. Eventually you look in the mirror and realize something's changed. You don't flinch anymore. Her name doesn't sting. Her silence doesn't echo, because you filled the space with purpose. That's when the past truly dies. Not when you forget it, but when it stops defining you. And when you reach that place, everything shifts. People feel it. She feels it. But more importantly, you feel it. The freedom, the peace, the clarity. This is where emotional detachment becomes not just a survival tool, but a philosophy, a new way of being. And you realize that the love you Thought You Lost was never about her. It was about what you thought she gave you: value, worth, identity. But those were never hers to give. They were always yours to reclaim. That's the core of Stoicism. That's the essence of Stoic relationships, to reclaim your inner fortress so fully that nothing outside it can storm your gates. You stop reacting, you start responding, you stop needing, you start choosing. And in that space, you build something no one can take away: your emotional sovereignty, your strength, your stillness, your center. And if one day she comes back hoping to test the waters, hoping to see if she still holds a key, she won't. Find a door, she'll find a wall. Not one built out of bitterness, but out of boundaries. Not one built from pain, but from power. And that's the kind of man who wins, not because he chased victory, but because he became it. 4. Social proof. Show, don't show off. There's a quiet kind of message that hits harder than any text you'll ever send, any speech you could deliver, or any goodbye you thought was enough. That message is social proof, not the kind that screams for attention, but the kind that whispers powerfully through action. You don't tell the world you've moved on. You don't craft captions to look healed. You live it. You become the man she thought you'd never become, and you let the world reflect that transformation without a word. See, in Stoic relationships, we don't seek revenge. We rise above it. We don't try to spark jealousy. We just stop being the version of ourselves who would ever need to prove anything to someone who walked away. And that's exactly what makes it sting. Because here's the brutal truth most men ignore. She didn't leave because she stopped caring. She left because she didn't believe you were irreplaceable. Maybe she thought you'd linger. Maybe she assumed you'd fall apart. Maybe she expected you to stay stuck, to orbit her memory while she moved on. But when she sees you out there, thriving, focused, surrounded by new energy, leveling up in ways she never imagined, it flips the narrative, it rattles her expectations, and it challenges the belief that walking away was the right call. But don't misunderstand. This isn't about trying to impress her. That's weak, that's performative, and nothing about Stoicism is performative. This is about building a life so rich in growth and purpose that her absence becomes irrelevant. Not because you're pretending, but because you're genuinely fulfilled without her. And when that happens, when your evolution becomes undeniable, people notice. The world starts treating you differently. You walk differently, you speak differently, your energy shifts. You're not chasing status, you are status. And that shift becomes your loudest message. She may not react publicly, she might never comment or like or reach out, but trust this. She sees it. Women are intuitive. They watch, even in silence, especially in silence. They watch for signals that they still matter. And when those signals disappear, when they're replaced by photos of new places, new friends, new experiences, real ones, not staged moments, it hits different. Because now she's not guessing if you've moved on. She's watching it happen in real time. And if she still had doubts about her decision, now they start to multiply. Because the man she thought would fade has become someone who doesn't even remember what it felt like to need her approval. That's the power of authentic social proof. It's not about forcing her to feel jealous. It's about living so freely that she can't help but wonder what she gave up. But let's be honest, most men get this part wrong. They try to manipulate the narrative. They post pictures with girls they don't care about. They pretend to be happy while their heart is still drowning. That's not power, that's insecurity in disguise. And she knows the difference. She can smell desperation beneath your fake confidence. So stop trying to create an illusion. Start building a reality, one where your days are filled with things that bring you real joy, one where your time is invested in passions, progress, and purpose, one where your circle gets tighter, stronger, and more aligned with your future. Because when you move like that, your social proof doesn't need filters. It speaks for itself. And that's what truly hurts. Not that you're trying to replace her, but that you don't need to. That life got better without her, that your glow-up wasn't a reaction, it was a revolution. She'll feel it when your energy no longer centers around her, when you stop dropping breadcrumbs. When your silence isn't filled with bitterness, but with boldness. That's when she starts questioning everything, and don't expect her to admit it. She won't, she can't, not at first. But in the quiet spaces of her own life, she will. She'll compare the man she left with the man you've become. She'll compare the ease of her new situation with the edge of what she lost. And that comparison doesn't fade, it lingers. Because the truth is, most people don't regret the person they left. They regret the version that person became after they left. And if you've done the work, real work, not showboating, you become living proof that she made the wrong choice. But again, none of this works if you're still doing it for her. That's the test. Are you living your life to heal or to be seen? Are you building your future because it fuels your soul or because you want her to notice? That's the difference between real stoicism and shallow pride. And if you're still tied to her reaction, you're still tied to her presence. So let go. Not to hurt her, but to free yourself. Let your life speak without needing to explain. Let your actions echo louder than your absence. And as the weeks pass, and your presence online becomes a reflection of purpose, not pain, you'll start to feel the shift. The calls may come, the messages may arrive, the subtle check-ins, the reactions to stories, the random just thinking of you texts. But by then they won't matter, because the man you've become won't be waiting, he'll be rising. And here's the thing, once you truly elevate, you stop looking back, not out of ego, but out of alignment, because her world and your world are no longer the same. She's not part of the vision. She's a chapter, a lesson, and you are the author writing the next pages without her. That's what Stoic relationships are about, not just walking away from the past, but walking toward a future where your worth is unquestionable. So if you're in this moment right now, this pivotal space where you can either perform or progress, choose progress, choose authenticity, choose real growth, and let the world catch up to your transformation. Because once they do, the only thing left for her to feel is regret. Not because you wanted her to, but because you made it impossible not to. And if that resonated with you, if this shift is something you're committing to, I want you to do one simple thing. Like this video and comment #1 below. And if you're serious about mastering this level of emotional evolution, don't forget to subscribe. This isn't just about moving on, it's about moving up. And the journey has just begun. 5. The power shift from option to standard. There's a moment, a quiet, powerful turning point when you realize something has changed. Not around you, but within you. The woman who once had your full attention, who once could tilt your world with a single word, no longer has the same effect. You don't check your phone expecting her name. You don't wonder where she is or who she's with. You don't rehearse imaginary conversations or regret the ones that didn't go the way you hoped. Because something fundamental has shifted. The emotional seesaw she used to control has lost its grip. And it's not because she came back or explained herself. It's because you changed. You stopped seeing yourself as someone waiting to be chosen and started seeing yourself as someone who never needed to be. That is the power shift. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't come with a dramatic realization. It creeps in like clarity, like calm, like confidence that doesn't shout but resonates in silence. In Stoic relationships, that shift is everything. It's when you stop being an option and start being a standard, not just for her, but for yourself. And here's the hard truth most never want to admit: she never thought you'd get there. When she walked away, when she ghosted, when she asked for space, she wasn't expecting you to transform. She was expecting you to wait. She assumed you'd stall your life, hoping for her return. Because that's what most do. They pause. They Pine. They hold the door open emotionally even when she's long gone, but not you, because now you've closed that door, not with hate, not with spite, but with a sense of self-respect so deep, so earned, that going backward no longer makes sense. The man you've become doesn't fit the frame she placed you in. You've outgrown the emotional architecture of that relationship, and in doing so, you've become something far more rare, unavailable. And not the fake, I'm busy to seem cool, unavailable. The real kind, the kind that's immersed in purpose, that's dedicated to self-mastery, that no longer has time or energy for emotional games. That's when she starts to feel it. Not your silence, not your distance, but your evolution. Because power doesn't need to be proven, it's felt. And when you stop chasing, when you stop reacting, when you stop allowing her decisions to define your reality, she starts to feel something foreign, powerlessness. She thought you'd always be in her orbit. She believed she could return whenever. She pleased that your heart was a revolving door, always unlocked, always available. But when she looks again and finds that door closed, that energy gone, that loyalty redirected inward, that's when her confidence breaks. And that break doesn't come from bitterness. It comes from your absence, your complete, unbothered, emotionally sovereign absence. But remember, this is not about punishing her. It's not about playing games or teaching her a lesson. That's still reactive. That's still you living inside her frame. The true power shift isn't about her at all. It's about you stepping into your own frame, defining your life on your terms, operating from your own values, your own vision. And here's the paradox. When you do that, when you no longer need to be seen, when you no longer care if she understands what she lost, you become the very man she hoped she'd find when she left. But now she doesn't have access. Because she was never the destination. She was just the mirror reflecting what you needed to fix. That's what Stoicism teaches us. Not to control the external, but to master the internal. The shift from option to standard is not about changing how she sees you. It's about changing how you see yourself. It's about realizing that your worth is not determined by who chooses you, but by what you choose to become. And once that switch flips, you stop asking questions like, why did she leave? Or, does she still think about me? You start asking, what kind of man do I want to be? And what kind of life demands my attention? You start choosing your path with intention, not emotion. And the more you lean into that purpose, the more your energy changes. It becomes grounded, centered, whole. And wholeness is magnetic. It's untouchable. It's rare. Because most people are walking around fractured, distracted, chasing validation, begging for closure. But you've become a man who no longer needs closure because you've already closed the chapter within. And here's the brutal truth. Once you become that man, the old version of you dies. The one who needed her, the one who waited, the one who compromised his standards in the name of love. He's gone, buried in the ashes of your rebirth. And when she tries to revisit the past, when she sends that message, that song, that old memory, you don't even flinch. Not because you've stopped caring, but because you've started choosing yourself, your peace, your future. That is the power shift. And it doesn't come easy. It requires discipline. It requires confronting your shadows, your wounds, your patterns. It requires saying no to temporary comfort in exchange for permanent growth. But once you make that trade, you never go back. You don't settle. You don't entertain what you've outgrown. You don't chase what's no longer aligned because you've become a standard, not a phase, not a maybe, not a second chance. You are now a force. The kind of man who moves with direction, who speaks with intention, who no longer tolerates chaos disguised as love. And in that stillness, in that certainty, she feels it. Even if she never says it, even if she never admits it, she knows. She underestimated you. She thought she could leave and return to the same man. But you've changed, you've built, you've risen, and now her past decision feels like a permanent loss. Not because you punished her, but because you outpaced her. You evolved so far beyond her expectation that you no longer exist in the reality she once controlled. And that's a power she can never reclaim, not through tears, not through apologies, not through guilt. Because once you become a standard, you don't go backward. You don't re-audition for roles you've outgrown. You don't reopen doors that led you to lose yourself. That is what Stoic relationships teach us, to evolve with such focus, such integrity, such quiet intensity, that the only thing louder than your silence is your growth. And when that growth becomes your lifestyle, the past becomes irrelevant. The past becomes small. And the woman who once defined your emotions becomes a memory, not a motivation, because you've built a life where she no longer fits. And that, more than any message, any absence, any silence, is what truly sets you free. 6. The return. Respond with strength, not emotion. It always happens. Maybe not when you expect it, maybe not when you still want it, but at some point they reach out. A message, a like, a comment on something random. Maybe she reacts to a story. Maybe she sends a vague, "How have you been?" Maybe she digs into an old photo just to stir a memory. But it comes. And it's in that moment, the one you fantasized about during your worst nights, the one you played out in your head 1,000 times, that your true growth is tested. Not when she left, not when it was silent, but when the silence breaks. Because now you face the ultimate question: will you respond like the man she left, or the man she never thought you could become? The return is not a gift. It's not confirmation of your worth. It's not closure wrapped in a pretty message. It's a test. She's not reaching out because she's ready to rebuild. She's reaching out to see if the door is still open, to see if you're still emotionally available, to see if the power she once had still lingers in your world. And if you fold, if you rush to respond, if you meet her with warmth, vulnerability, hope, you lose everything you've built. Because that shows her one thing: you were pretending to move on, pretending to evolve, pretending to be detached when deep down you were still waiting for this moment. And the second she senses that, the balance resets. She has power. Again, she knows you're still reachable, still longing, still hers in some way, and just like that, she disappears again. This is the trap most men fall into, not because they're weak, but because they confuse attention with affection. They mistake curiosity for commitment, but Stoic relationships demand something higher. They demand that you see the message for what it is, not a sign to rekindle the past, but a signal that your growth has started to echo in her reality. You've created a gap, a void, and she's feeling it. But now the question is, will you protect it, or will you fill it too soon, too easily, and lose all the progress you made? When she returns, you don't ignore her. That's not strength. That's emotion disguised as pride. You don't block her out of spite. That's still reacting. True strength is in your composure, your calm, your clarity. You respond without excitement, without resentment, without emotional investment. She expects either fire or frost. She's prepared for anger or desperation. But when she receives indifference, measured, neutral, unreadable, it disrupts everything. She doesn't know how to read you anymore. She doesn't know if you care. And that uncertainty is louder than any reply you could send. You speak to her like a distant acquaintance, brief, cold, polite, not to manipulate, but to protect your inner frame. You show her that the man she's contacting is no longer the one she left. He's not bitter. He's not broken. He's simply beyond. And that distance, that stoic energy, that's what breaks her illusion of control. Because if she truly regretted losing you, she wouldn't be testing the waters. She wouldn't be feeling out the vibe. She'd be all in. She'd be transparent. She'd fight. But she's not. She's looking for reassurance, for proof that she still matters. And when she doesn't get it, when she feels your disinterest, your focus, your detachment, it cuts deeper than anything else. Because it's not punishment, it's proof. Proof that she no longer holds any power in your world, that she's no longer a variable in your emotional formula, and that proof is the hardest thing to swallow, especially for someone who thought you'd always be there. This is the moment when your self-respect has to outweigh your nostalgia, when your discipline has to outrun your desire. Because as tempting as it might be to open that door, to seek clarity, to entertain what was familiar, you already know what lies down that road. You know how it ends. You've seen that movie before, and you didn't spend all this time growing, healing, evolving just to relive a story you've already outgrown. This is where Stoicism saves you. It teaches you to act from principles, not impulses, from standards, not emotion. You don't need closure. You don't need answers. You don't need a final conversation to feel whole. You are whole. And your silence is not empty. It's sacred. It's filled with everything you've built since she left. The new habits, the stronger boundaries, the sharpened purpose. That silence is not a void anymore. It's a boundary she no longer has access to. And when she realizes that, when she sees she can't just step back in, it shakes her more than any message ever could. Because now she knows the version of you she left is gone, replaced by a man who cannot be swayed, cannot be lured back into the cycle, cannot be pulled back into her frame. And here's what most don't understand. The real heartbreak isn't losing someone. It's realizing they no longer need you, that they've become someone you can't reach. That's what she feels now. And that regret, the one that hits late, the one that lingers, is the kind that stays. Because it doesn't come from missing what was. It comes from witnessing what is, your rise, your power, your peace, and knowing she no longer has a place in it. But remember, you're not doing this to hurt her. You're not cold for the sake of being cold. You're calm because you found something better than love. You found alignment. And love without alignment is chaos. It's confusion. It's an addiction to hope wrapped in the memory of what once was. But alignment is clear. Alignment is peace. And when she returns and finds that you're no longer emotionally available, that your attention is now your own, that your world is no longer shaped around her, she feels the loss. Not because you were cruel, but because you grew. So when the message comes, when the old pattern tries to restart, stay centered, stay unmoved. Don't seek meaning in her words. Don't seek validation in her attention. Don't break your frame. To prove a point, just be the man you've become and let her feel what it's like to reach for someone who has already let go. If this part of the journey speaks to you, if you feel the shift happening within yourself, like this video, comment number 1 to claim your strength, and don't forget to subscribe. Because the next stage of this path will take you even deeper, beyond response, beyond power, into the realm of the truly untouchable. 7. The unavailable king, the man she can't have. Availability is comfort, predictability is safety, familiarity is control. These are the 3 anchors most women rely on after a breakup. Not because they still want you, but because they still expect you. They expect you to be there, lingering, just out of reach, emotionally present even if physically gone. They expect your energy to orbit their world, to respond when called, to remain an option even if you're no longer a priority. That's why being truly unavailable is not just powerful, it's revolutionary, because it shatters the dynamic she once depended on. It destroys the script she had written for your role in her life. And when a man rises to the level of being truly, authentically, unshakably unavailable, not as a strategy, not as a manipulation, but as a byproduct of genuine purpose and progress, he becomes something she cannot handle, something she cannot stop thinking about, something she cannot access. And that's where the magnetism lies. See, most men pretend to be unavailable. They pull back for a few days, they play hard to get, they disappear temporarily just to get her attention. But she sees through that. She knows it's a performance, and as soon as she throws a little bait, a memory, a hay, a thirst trap, those men come running back, proving they were never really unavailable. They were just waiting to be chased, waiting to be noticed, waiting for permission to reattach. But the Stoic man doesn't wait. He doesn't pause his life in hope. He doesn't rearrange his goals for anyone. He keeps building, climbing, evolving, and in doing so, he becomes unreachable, not because he wants to hurt her, but because he's ascended so far that she no longer fits into the framework of his new reality. He becomes the unavailable king. Not cruel, not cold, but clear. Clear in his direction, clear in his values. Clear in the fact that love is not a distraction, it's a complement. And anything that disrupts his peace, dilutes his mission, or dims his clarity is simply no longer welcome in his kingdom. That's the shift. That's when he becomes the man she can't have, not because he closed the door, but because he grew beyond the room. And now, she watches, she wonders, she replays. Not just the memories of what was, but the fantasy of what could have been if she had stayed, if she had seen his potential, if she had believed in him before the transformation. But it's too late, because now he doesn't need her belief. He believes in himself. He no longer needs her attention. He is fueled by purpose, and in the quiet spaces of her mind, she begins to see the gap, the emotional and energetic space between the man she left and the man she now sees, thriving, focused, unavailable. And that space is where obsession begins, because women don't chase men who need them. They chase men who are above need, who are full with or without validation, who move through life with a presence so centered, so grounded, that nothing external shakes them. That's what Stoicism creates. That's what Stoic relationships require. The ability to walk alone, the discipline to keep building in silence, the power to detach not out of bitterness, but out of elevation. And once you become that man, once your time, attention, and presence become rare, not by strategy but by truth, you become the ultimate standard. You stop being an option. You stop being a memory. You become the moment of realization in her life that she let go of something irreplaceable. And that's the type of realization that haunts her, not because of who you were, but because of who you became without her. She will test, she will try, she will throw signals into your space just to see if they still land. But when she gets no response, when your energy remains untouchable, when your life continues without even a ripple from her efforts, she begins to understand. She didn't just lose a man, she lost access to a realm of growth, of depth, of power she may never find again. Because once you ascend to the level of an unavailable king, your standards change, your tastes refine, your time becomes sacred. And most importantly, your emotions become guarded not out of fear, but out of wisdom. You've learned, you've lived, you've lost. And through all of it, you've built a new version of yourself, one that doesn't bend for temporary attention or nostalgia. That's the man she can't have. Not because you're playing a role, but because you've stepped into your truth. And that truth demands alignment. It demands reciprocity. It demands emotional integrity. Anything less is no longer attractive, it's noise. And kings don't chase noise. They build empires, they expand, they create legacies. And the women who didn't see that vision when it was raw, when it was forming, when it was vulnerable, they don't get to benefit from it now that it's real. That's not revenge, that's reality. That's the price of not believing in someone when they were still becoming. And no matter how much she tries to reconnect, she'll feel it. The wall, the shift, the absence of emotional access. It will feel cold at first, then confusing, then devastating, because she thought she had time. She thought she had control. But now she's left watching a man she once knew become the version she never imagined, and realizing she has no way back. And maybe she'll try to convince herself it doesn't matter. Maybe she'll distract herself. Maybe she'll reach out with fake intentions just to get a read on you. But nothing she does will matter, because your silence isn't a tactic, it's a lifestyle. Your focus isn't temporary, it's locked in. And your elevation is not a phase, it's permanent. Because the moment you made peace with the past, the moment you stopped needing her to feel your growth, your energy changed. And that energy, unbothered, unshaken, unattached, is what makes you a king. And kings don't chase, they don't explain, they don't look back, they don't settle, they don't entertain what once broke them. They lead, they rise, they build, and the women who once thought they could come and go as they pleased, they watch from a distance, powerless, silent, and filled with questions that will never get answered, because the answers live in a world they no longer belong to. In the end, this was never about her. It was never about making her regret, making her miss you, or even proving that she was wrong. That path, the one of reaction, of revenge, of emotionally driven moves, was never yours to walk. This journey, from silence to evolution, from heartbreak to personal power, from loss to mastery, has always been about one thing: you. The version of you that was waiting, needing, hoping. He served his purpose. He was the one who cracked so that something stronger could be born. And now, after everything, you've stepped into something unshakable. A deeper knowing of who you are, what you're worth, and how little external validation matters when you are in full command of your energy. That's what Stoicism is. That's what Stoic relationships demand: to love with clarity, to walk away with dignity, to grow in silence without needing to be seen. And now she sees it. Whether she admits it or not, whether she reaches out or stays distant, she knows. The man she left is no longer available. The version of you who waited is gone, and in his place stands someone she can't reach, can't shake, can't forget. But here's the real win. You no longer care if she does, because you're not looking back. You're not hoping for anything. You're not moved by her presence or her absence. You're too focused on what's ahead, on your mission, on your peace, on the kind of life that was never possible while you were stuck in emotional limbo. You've become the storm, the standard, the man who doesn't chase, doesn't fold, doesn't flinch. And that right there is the ultimate power, not because you've won her back, but because you've won yourself back. And that is something no one can ever take from you again. If this message struck a chord in you, like this video, subscribe to the channel and comment below, "I rise above." Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Someone who's been stuck, someone who's been waiting, because the time to rise is now. Thank you for watching. Stay focused, stay disciplined, and remember, you were always the prize.